Jared Polin, PhonosPhoto.com, and this is your
It's snowing.
Photo News Fix. First up, I want to thank everybody who wished me a happy birthday last week in the comments or by hammering that like button, which you did harder than the Hebrew hammer himself. On to the first story. Nikon has released the first firmware update for the ZR, firmware 1.10. They also quietly and without fanfare released firmware 5.31 for the Z9 that fixed a minor bug with the AF. But let's talk about the ZR firmware. Nikon has made timecode syncing better. Not only can you still set timecode via Bluetooth, but you now can also jam in through the external microphone/line input connector to make it even better. Even when you remove it, the timecode stays synced. Nikon has also added something called Power On Lamp Energy Saver, which basically leaves the power light on at all times so you know that the camera is powered on. Oh, which means when it's turned off, the light won't be on. Now I know this sounds small, but previously if the screen was shut, you couldn't tell if your camera was still on or not, so this will be helpful. Now there were a few other minor updates to LUTs and file naming, but the biggest upgrade of all is you can now record continuously for up to 6 hours, which improves on the original 125 minutes of record time. Now keep in mind, this isn't for raw recording. Now, as always, if you have a Nikon ZR, I suggest you give it a good weeks before upgrading, unless you really need that 6 hours of record time today.
Christine.
This fix is brought to you by ProGrade and their PG25 Pro dock. But before I get into that dock, we use ProGrade memory cards in all of our cameras for both stills and videos. Now we use everything from their CF Express A and B cards to SD cards, micro SD, as well as ProGrade's blazingly fast SSDs. On top of that, we only use ProGrade card readers for blazing fast transfers of our data. Now on a quick side note, for the fastest transfer rates, make sure you're using ProGrade's included cables and not some cheap, slow ass cable. Yeah, the cables really do matter. Don't cheap out. All right, back to the dock. If you're like me and you work off a laptop, you know you're limited on inputs. Well, with ProGrade's PG25 dock, you're gonna gain 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports, 1 Thunderbolt 5 140-watt charging port, 2 USB-Cs and 2 USB-A ports, 2.5 gig high-speed Ethernet port, and of course, it comes with certified Thunderbolt 5 cables, which you better use. To save 15% on everything on ProGrade's website, like cards and this dock, click on the link down below in the description and be sure to use the code FRO at checkout to get your discount. And it lets them know that I sent you. Next up, Nikon Rumors, who only generally chimes in when they're pretty sure that a rumor is true, has shared a rumor that Nikon might announce a new 120mm to 300mm 2.8 TC by the end of 2026. Now back in 2020, Nikon released their 120 to 300 2.8, but for the F mount. Now this was strange at the time because the shift to Z mount was already well underway. Now don't get me wrong, neither Canon or Sony had anything close to this beast of a lens at that time. Now I say beast because it weighed in over 7 freaking pounds. For comparison, Canon's 100 to 300 2.8, which was released in 2023 for the RF mount, not only goes wider to 100, but comes in at 5.7 pounds or 2,590 grams. Now that is a huge difference in weight. Now Nikon Rumors wasn't sure if the new lens would be a 100 to 300 or a 120 to 300 with a built-in TC, and now they are confident in saying it will be the latter. Now personally, I don't think there's much of a difference between 100 and 120 millimeters, but I'm also against the built-in TC.
Boo this man!
Now, before you rip my head off for saying that, I think the built-in TC in the 400Z makes sense for a prime lens, but not for a zoom, and here's why. When you flip the 1.4 TC in, your 120 to 300 becomes a 168 to 420 millimeter f4. If you take a photo from 120 to 214 millimeters on the zoom range with the TC engaged, you're basically kicking yourself in the nuts. Well, what do you mean, Jared? Well, 214 millimeters times 1.4 is 299, meaning not only do you cost yourself a stop of light, you're also costing yourself quality.
Don't worry.
Because anything under 300 millimeters on the zoom range should never have the TC engaged, period. Look, if you want to shoot at 300 with the TC engaged, go for it. You'll now have a 420 f4, and for most people, that's going to be good enough. Now, at the end of the day, if this lens is real, it's not only going to be solid, but it's going to be expensive, and hopefully not 8 freaking pounds. Now, how much do you think this lens is going to be? Let me know down below. There's one thing I forgot to say about ProGrade and their plug, is they were just approved by NASA to not only go to space, but go to the moon on the Artemis mission. So if it's good enough for NASA, well, it's kind of good enough for me.
Fly me to the moon.
And finally, Sony Alpha Rumor says they can now confirm that Sony is developing a new 180 megapixel medium format sensor. Now, according to their reliable sources, Sony is about to introduce a new medium format sensor, and they don't know if it will be partially stacked or not. Now, a sensor like this would more than likely find its way into a future Fuji GFX line of camera. Now, I personally don't think Sony will be getting into the medium format camera game themselves. Now, I guess anything is possible, but it would mean coming out with an entirely new mount along with a bevy of lenses to support a new medium format system. The big question is the market big enough or profitable enough for Sony to get into? Would it hurt sales of their other cameras, or would it open an entirely new market for them? But again, is that market big enough? Look, I'm always a fan of bigger sensors and more data captured, but not for the same reasons as Sony Alpha Rumors guy, who gets it completely wrong. He says, and I quote, "The ability to leave your large telephoto lenses at home, use a smaller fixed lens, and simply crop 2, 3, or 4 times while having sufficient resolution." And that's where he finished the sentence. Not very good. Hold on, I got. You gotta let the sneeze out. When you gotta sneeze, you just let it out. Yeah, that's where he finished the sentence, but let me help him out and finish it for him. Having the ability to crop 2, 3, or 4 times with one fixed lens is beyond stupid. Now, talk about shooting without intent and purpose. That mentality of "I'll fix it in post" should never enter your brain as a photographer.
Explain that?
More resolution isn't about more cropping, it's about more quality. Would you invest in a medium format Sony system? If so, let me know down below. And there you have it, that's your photo news fix this time around. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, ProKnowsphoto.com. See ya.